Hello and welcome to Backyard Catch. This is Nick Roby once again. Welcome to our College Football Playoff Committee podcast where I have three of our guys on here to talk about it. We have our friend Hank, Chad, and Will ready to talk some college football. How's it going, guys?
Going well. How about you, Nick?
It's good. Enjoying a little game week. Chad, how are you feeling about your Buckeyes?
Doing great, as far as I know, we're all healthy. And, hey, that's what matters, right? 2020.
All healthy, yes. We got our good friend Hank here, too. Hank, how was your have a good Christmas and you ready to go?
Oh, yeah. Ready to go.
Let's do it. So these three gentlemen have graciously joined in on being contributors with me for the website. So be in tune with that coming up into this new year. But we've talked about some fun different things, but they've all joined in with this. And we thought it'd be fun to get all four of us on at the same time and have a little panel to talk a little college football, which is really fun. And also what's fun too about this is that we each have different fan bases that we cheer for and have different perspectives when that comes from this, which is I really like. What also makes this fun is that as you've heard, I'm a big Clemson fan, and then Chad and Hank are both Ohio State fans. So it's going to be an interesting conversation when it comes to the playoff. And then we got our boy Will over here with the Gamecocks. Yes, Will.
I will be the balancing factor in all of this. So whenever we go too red or too orange, I'll kind of bring it back to the middle.
Yeah, that's good. Nothing like your in-state rival to bring things back to the middle.
Exactly.
Yes.
Well, and really, too, I'm actually would be the balancing factor also between Nick and Hank, being that I, as an Ohio State guy, am married to a Tiger. So
it is
50 here.
It is true. And I'm married to a Gamecock. So it all comes back to the middle, doesn't it?
And I'm not married, so there we go.
Ladies.
Yeah. Hank coming from the top rim. Cool. I love it. So we can get started on talking about through these different playoff matchups. So I'm sure that y'all are somewhat aware of what's happening with this. We've had a crazy 2020 year where we didn't even know we were going to have college football at all. And here we are. It is Monday, December 28th after Christmas. And we have two semifinals after playing a college football season. So at some point, if you were going to talk to us back in maybe April or May, we didn't know if this was going to happen. So the fact we even can talk about this is pretty cool. So we've got number 1 Alabama playing number 4, who's the SEC champion, playing number 4 Notre Dame. And they're playing in the Rose Bowl, which got moved from California to Texas based on COVID reasons and not having people be able to attend. And then we have Clemson, Ohio State in the rematch. But they're playing the Sugar Bowl this year. So, fellas, the number one question is, before we get into the matchups, do you think the committee got it right? Are these the 4 teams? Hank, you're shaking your head. Who do you think the 4 teams should have been?
No. So top 3 is definitely right. I think without a doubt it should be the SEC champion, the ACC champion, and the Big Ten champion in Bama, Clemson, Ohio State, and in that order. But then Notre Dame, I feel like they had their chance to prove themselves against a playoff team in the ACC championship. And it would be one thing if it was like a close game, but they did not stand a chance from the start. And so you have just a Notre Dame team that just got blown out by Clemson, who's the number 2 team. I'm sure the same thing will happen with Bama. And so I would have liked to see either Texas A&M get the chance. But the thing with them is they've also got a big loss to Bama. And so also kind of have had a chance against a playoff team to prove themselves and did not. And so I probably would have liked to see Cincinnati in there being an unbeaten team, the best of the group of 5 teams, based on the committee. And they're unproven against that kind of group of talent, that elite talent. And so we will never really know if they could compete with the Bama's, Clemson's, Ohio State's in that playoff pool. Whereas we have seen what Notre Dame and Texas A&M have done, and they lost by a lot to Bama and Clemson, respectively. So,
Will,
don't you have our rankings for who we had for the top 6?
I do, and I can list them out if y'all want to see that. And also,
do that so we can see if any of us thought that the top 4 were correct.
Yeah, there are some interesting top 4s, and this has also been before some of these bowl games have been played. So I will put that out there, and you can look and stay tuned with the website. We'll have our official top 4 teams article on there up soon. But for Will, your top 4 was Alabama, Clemson, Texas A&M, Notre Dame, with Ohio State and then Cincinnati as the first 2 out. Hank had who he said Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Cincinnati, with A&M as 5 and Notre Dame was 6. Chad at Ohio State 1, Alabama 2, Cincinnati 3, Coastal 4, San Jose State 5, Indiana 6. And then I had Alabama 1, Clemson 2, Notre Dame 3, Ohio State 4, Cincinnati 5, A&M 6. So that's
not going to lie. I actually do not remember the fact that I put Ohio State number 1. I think I probably laughed as I did that and submitted it. And if we're being totally honest, it probably was just to counteract Will because I knew Will had dropped us pretty far. So.
Well, I like that. That's what you're defending rather than San Jose State being number 5
or Coastal number 4.
I
like Coastal.
I can see that. I would have loved had Coastal made the playoff, man.
Some of that logic is just following in Dabo's quote, right? Other than Ohio State number 1. So.
Yeah, it was. I definitely feel like it was pretty shortly after we were hearing that Ohio State had ranked Ohio State 11. So it felt a little bit like a rebuttal there, but I did do some chuckling with Chad's. I loved but you've been pretty consistent, I would say, in how you've been ranking people.
I tried to be.
Yeah.
I mean, it was week what I was doing, so I tried to make sure I was really consistent in that. And
how you thought about teams. So I would say, other than Chad having Ohio State 1, Alabama was 1 for all of us, and you had Alabama 2. So that seemed like a pretty fair consensus, number 1. Both Chad and Hank had Cincinnati in there, and I was like debating on them. And then Will and I both had Notre Dame in there. And then that was the one, and then you and A&M in there as well, Will. So those are pretty much the similar teams as to what people were kind of thinking through, just kind of the order. So, I mean, what do we think that Cincinnati did enough this year to make the playoff, or do we need more teams for a team like a Cincinnati to make? Will, what's your thought?
I think that the playoff in the format it is now, a non-Power 5 team is never going to make it. It's just not going to happen. The only way to get a non-Power 5 in would be to go to an 8-team, 6-team at a minimum. But I don't think they'll do buys. So an 8-team playoff. Once Notre Dame goes back independent, of course they can get in. But I think other than them, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, that's fair. Hank, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I would agree for the most part. I think there could be a scenario where a non-Power 5 school does make it, but I think the way that would have to happen is like taking a look back probably, over a decade ago now at like Boise State when they had like Kellen Moore at quarterback. They were a powerhouse team for multiple years and really established themselves early on. I don't think just a single season like we've seen at a Coastal Carolina or Cincinnati, like a team coming out of nowhere. I don't think they have a chance to make the playoff. But like, let's say UCF had continued to be good this year or so. I think a team like that has established themselves as a consistently good team in that group of 5 schools, I think they could have a chance. But teams like Cincinnati, Coastal, San Jose State, who are unranked at the start of the year but then go undefeated, I don't think they have that built-up credibility, which is what the committee needs to enter them in. But sure. I do think that this year Cincinnati has made enough of a statement in order to make the playoff. I mean, they've played teams like SMU, Memphis. I have their schedule put up right now: UCF, Tulsa, Army. I mean, teams that are obviously would not be as probably highly touted if they were in a Power 5 conference, but it's not like they're playing just cakewalk teams week in and week out. Mm-hmm. They're playing some actual opponents, and a lot of who could participate at the Power 5 level, I think.
Yeah, very fair. Chad, what do you think? You had them number 3 in your playoff.
Yeah, I think I honestly kind of agree with both Will and Hank in that it's going to be really difficult in the current format for a group of 5 team, even as one as good as I think Cincinnati is this year. I think they're very well coached. I think they have a really high level of talent for one of those teams. And for the most part, they dispatch teams on their schedule pretty well. And so the tough thing for me is I want to say, yes, they deserve it. But also this year is unfortunately probably proving against my better hope that expansion of the playoff is not necessary, may not be something that's on the table. Because if you really look at it, the top 4 teams out, number 5 through 8 in the real rankings, we could find warts on all of them. And we've found big warts on Notre Dame. And honestly, certainly you could make an argument against Ohio State being in the playoff too. And so I think it's tough to have 3 teams that are, I think, fairly consensusly head and shoulders above. But even then, everyone goes like, well, they're not right. Like they're not last year's teams. Like Ohio State and Clemson are not last year's Ohio State and Clemson. And so, like I want to say, yeah, Cincinnati deserved it. I don't think Notre Dame deserves to be in there, but also I don't really know who I would put in there. Because I think even Cincinnati, they'd put up a fight and they would still get run off the field by Alabama.
Yeah, I think that's the hard thing about this with 4 is that I would love to see a Cincinnati in there, like a group of 5. But the hard part is you have to see them play the competition to know that that they can play. And so it's a conversation of like they're asking who's deserving or who like should get a shot. But then the hard part is you're right. Like, I mean, it's based on the year. We have some years where you could argue there's 5 teams that could qualify. And then there's other years where you're like, really, there's 2 and we're trying to fill the last 2 spots. But I do think we're moving to 8 just because we have 4 spots for 5 power conferences. And eventually you're going to have some other people not really interested. We're already having opt-outs from like a team like North Carolina, who's going to the Orange Bowl, arguably the biggest bowl game in their history, and they're having some of their best players opt out, and it's not a playoff game. So college football has to do some things to keep people interested and not just these same few teams. And as a fan of one of those teams, I'm having a fun time, but it doesn't create the drama or the buildup for these other teams to come in and play. I did make an 8-team playoff what it would be. I can say that for later or share it now. Just kind of playing that out. But I do kind of think that's where I can see that's where we're heading, like a 6 or 8-team playoff, just to include everybody. Even if we get the same results, I think there'd be less to argue with that many teams. But there's always me as a team on the outside end. Because you look at A&M, yes, they only lost once, but then they got blown out by Alabama. And I would argue, and you could also see that many of their teams that they played had losing records. So,
I think
yeah,
you saying, Nick, that even if it might play out the same way, I don't think it necessarily would play out the same way. I see a team like Oklahoma, for example. They have been one of the hottest teams in the country lately. and I think I think they could be the fourth best team in the country right now. But 2 early losses just takes them out of playoff contention, even though they may be playing like one of the top 4 teams at this moment. They're not going to get in. And so moving to an 8 team, even a 6 team, where 2 teams would have a bye. I think Oklahoma is a team that struggle early on, especially in college football where players just cycle in and out year after year. It can be hard for some teams to get that footing at the start of the year. And by the end of the year, when they picked up momentum, it's like they're already shut out because of those early blemishes on their record.
That's what I think. That makes a great transition to a 6 or 8 team where you have conference champions from the Power 5 automatically get bids. So you can have a team, like Hank said, like Oklahoma, who have been playing. They pretty much have been like a top 4 or 5 team over the last month or so. But have them have a chance to get in because, like Hank said, 2 early losses and you're done, especially in the season where a team like Ohio State only plays 6 games. If they were to lose 1 or 2, then they'd be done for sure. Yeah. So 2 losses, you're not going to stand a chance at this format.
Yeah, I think it's very fair. And I think the question then becomes, if you want to include that, you have to also be like, okay, like we could have a national champion who has 2 losses, 3 losses on their thing, and being like, well, if that's the format, then that we're saying that's the true champion, But I think that's very fair.
And so, like with the NFL too, like the Giants back in the day, they barely made it in as the last wild card team. They were like 9-7 in the regular season and won a championship. So, I mean, it comes down to the best team versus the hottest team. Are you fine with that? I mean, really, I really just want to see the best games possible.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I want the same.
That's kind of where I stand.
I want the best teams in the finals, and however we get there, and that is the most clear for teams knowing how to get there. I think that was the hard part with this year is there wasn't as many clear qualifications because they're trying to leave it open, but it just feels like it changes slightly every year. But just to say like what an 8-team playoff could be if you pick those champions, obviously you'd have Bama, Clemson, Ohio State as those 3 champions, Oklahoma. You would technically have Oregon. I'm just using what was based off of this year, even though they were 4-2 or something like that, and had to get COVID to get in. And then you take the group of 5 champion, like the best record with their champion. And I was saying that's Cincinnati. And then the 2 at-large bids, I just took the 2 highest next-ranked teams, just who hadn't qualified. And that was Notre Dame and A&M. And then if I took those top 8 and just based them on the rankings as the playoff committee ranked them, you could just make it as simple as that. You could have, it'd be Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Notre Dame, A&M, Oklahoma, Cincinnati, Oregon. And then if you made those matchups, and my thought is if you did an 8-team playoff, you could do the first round at the home field of the higher ranked team just to reward the regular season, and it just builds it up versus having to go through all these different bowl games. So if that was the case,
is the best. Football in the snow and the cold is the best.
Yeah, I mean, like that'd be. I mean, having a playoff game at Ohio State, like at this time of year, it would be insane. Like it'd be so cool. So these would be the matchups just as in that format. It'd be Bama versus Oregon. So you have Bama versus Oregon's been like decently hot after a couple early season losses. Clemson versus Cincinnati, which would be really interesting. Oklahoma traveling to Ohio State after playing a couple years ago, and then Notre Dame and A&M. So, and then obviously you just keep going from there. But it makes for interesting matchups. And I think if those are the 8 teams, you could maybe argue Florida or something like that. But Florida had their opportunity in the SEC championship. So I feel like you take away less. There's less places for people to be like, well, this should have been this team. I feel like at least you get to settle more things on the field. So I'm leaning towards an 8-team playoff after all this, but I think 4 is working okay though too. So what do y'all think?
Do you want to jump into the matchups then?
Yeah, let's jump into the matchups. We can start with Alabama, Notre Dame. So what are some things that y'all are like? What are you interested to watch in this game? This kind of open floor question. What are you looking to watch? What are you looking for, like, on Alabama? Like, what do they need to do to execute the win? What does Notre Dame need to execute? I mean, Notre Dame is the big underdog. I think they're like 15 points or maybe. So what are, like, big things y'all are looking for?
I'll kick it off. Alabama wins if they show up and play. I think is what it comes down to. Notre Dame, I think when they beat Clemson early in the season, of course, Trevor didn't play, so that had a lot to do with it. But they were playing at home. They kind of had momentum build up, and they just come off a crushing defeat to that same Clemson team with Trevor at quarterback. I don't think they stand a chance. If Notre Dame wins, they have to have a miracle. Alabama's offense just would have to stop working, which I don't see happening. They have, I think, probably a top 3 quarterback, a top 3 receiver, and a top 3 running back, at least in terms of this college football season, at the helm on their offense, plus just speed everywhere. So I don't see Notre Dame slowing them down one bit.
Yeah, that's very fair. I think this one can Chad.
I was just going to jump in and offer up. I agree with Will. I think Alabama just has to not get COVID and show up to play. Put on the jerseys, put on the helmets. And I think, it's a 17.5 point spread, I think is what it is. And that doesn't feel high enough for me. I think the only chance that Notre Dame has, aside from some crazy miracles and an infection to break out in Tuscaloosa, their lines have to be completely healthy, which they were in the first matchup against Clemson, and then they were banged up in the ACC championships. I do think that made a big difference. They have to not just win the trenches; they have to completely dominate the trenches in that game. And then Ian Book has to play the absolute game of his life to make any sort of dent in that. But I think if Alabama shows up and does what they know how to do, then I think they're going to be totally fine in that game.
Yeah, that's very fair.
Yeah, I agree that Notre Dame doesn't have a chance. The thing I would be most interested in seeing from this game, though, is I think the SEC has had an uncharacteristic lack of defense this season. And so, Alabama's offense has really looked spotless, to say the least. And so I think Notre Dame has a much higher ranked defense statistically than any of the other teams in the SEC, maybe except for Georgia. And so I'm just curious if, even though Notre Dame won't win this game, if they could maybe slow down Bama at all, and maybe show that Alabama's offense can be kind of maybe not stopped, but slowed down a little bit. Because as it looks right now, it almost looks like Alabama could run through even Clemson or Ohio State, I think. Just with, like you said, Will, I think one of the top 3 quarterbacks, top 3 running backs, and top 3 receivers on their roster.
Yeah. Bama this year has reminded me a lot of LSU last year, and just kind of watching them, that everything they do works. If they want to run the ball, works. Short pass game works. Deep pass game works. Very much like Joe Burrow last year, throwing to Jefferson and Chase and Edwards-Helaire out of the backfield. It's kind of been the same thing this year with Mac Jones and Najee and Devontae and Waddle before he got injured. So you have to, and like Hank was saying, if they can slow them down, that gives Ohio State or Clemson hope that they can slow them down in the championship, because you give either one of those defenses some time. If they can see weaknesses, then they'll try to exploit them in the championship.
Yeah, I think those are both great points, and I think that's the thing it would be interesting to see, is seeing a defense that has played decently well all year, except for probably in the ACC championship game this past year, or this past week or so. And that's the thing is interested, is how much can Notre Dame slow down Alabama? Is Alabama playing against a weaker set of SEC defenses, or is this another version of a very elite offense that is having a really hard time to be stopped? Or is it a mixture? My question is is Mac Jones really this good, or is Alabama's system becoming that good where they can get receivers and get them open? So can Mac Jones respond to being pressured and getting hit? I think that's the thing. Notre Dame has to create turnovers and capitalize on early and take momentum early, because if they're trying to play catch up, their offense is just not built that way. They're very ground and pound, use play action. So I feel like they would have to jump to an early lead, hold them off, and then make Alabama just basically beat them and choose one way to beat them, running or passing. But I don't think that'll happen, but I think that's what would have to happen. Did any one of y'all, if the spread is 17.5, do any one of y'all have Notre Dame covering, since we're all picking Alabama to win? Or do you think that, okay, I'm seeing a lot of shaking heads no, so I don't think so either. I think it's a 3-touchdown game.
That's what I was going to say, 21-28, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, for sure. Yes, Chad.
I was just going to say, too, I was just looking at some defensive statistics. I was just real curious to see that numbers-wise. It's interesting. The two best defenses that Alabama played were Georgia and A&M, both in kind of total yards per game allowed and points per game allowed. Mm-hmm. But both of those teams also only played 9 games, as opposed to most of the rest of the SEC played 11. And so, your statistics are a little bit skewed there. I think those two are probably two of the better defenses, but whereas Alabama had the best defense in the SEC on pretty much every metric. So it will be really interesting to see. Notre Dame was right there with those two teams, and yet Alabama, took care of those two teams pretty well. So,
yeah, no, for sure. I think it'll be very interesting to see in that, but we can move on if no one else has any other thoughts to probably the matchup that we're probably all the most interested in talking about for us, since we have a lot of fan skin in the game as well. It's number 2 Clemson playing number 3 Ohio State in the Sugar Bowl, which I thought that was an interesting point. As a slight note, is I would have thought it'd been in the reverse with us going this game being played in California, but because they can have more fans in Texas, they elected to have Alabama in there, and so we play in the Sugar Bowl. What are y'all the most interested in seeing? This is a rematch from last year, obviously, but does anyone have anything off the top of their head? What are they most interested in seeing from this game? Hank?
Yeah, I think the thing that's been being talked about the most is Lawrence versus Fields. But honestly, the thing I'm most interested in seeing out of this game is to see Ohio State play with a chip on their shoulder. I feel like that's not something that they're used to. They're very much used to being the team that is heavily favored in games. Even last year when they played Clemson, it's like, all right, it's like neck and neck, no one could really say okay, one's better than the other. I think a lot of people are saying that Clemson's go win this game. I mean, they're favored by over a touchdown. The last I saw, they were favored by 7.5. And then Dabo obviously has them at 11th, Ohio State, in his coach's rankings, and is defending that adamantly. And so I think Ohio State's rolling in with facing a team that has beat them several times the past kind of 5-6 years or so. They're going to be angry. They're going to be upset, with Dabo, just with the position they're in. And so I'm excited to see how they respond to that adversity that is normally something that they don't have to respond to.
That's very fair. I think, the coaches poll thing is very interesting. And to me, obviously I'm a big Dabo fan, so I love how outspoken he is. And he seems pretty upfront and just kind of says what's on his mind. He's pretty opinionated, but sometimes you're maybe just stop talking about it. However, I do think that people ask him a lot of questions, trying to poke him to say some things. So would I have wanted him to rank Ohio State 11 because I know how people are looking for stuff? No. But do I get the logic of why he voted them out because they hadn't played enough games? Yes. However, I don't know. It just was kind of like, it's a bigger deal than I think it is, but I don't want to give Ohio State more things to like put on the bulletin board because they already have a few things. Chad.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, you know, being the fan, if you're a fan of Clemson, I totally get being behind your coach, being brash and saying things. It obviously rubs a lot of people the wrong way, whatever team I would imagine you cheer for, unless it's Clemson. I think the tough thing with his statements, though, is, you know, being able to pull up very quickly what he said on September 16th, I think is what it was, where he said, no, there shouldn't be any requirements. Who knows what's going to happen? This is a crazy season, right? Like all of it is just a PR laying down the tracks and greasing skids for whatever needs to happen for his team. So he was looking ahead at that point, obviously, and saying, hey, we don't know if we're going to get to play all the games that are on our schedule. And so I'm going to go ahead and make the case now before we play any games that we should be in no matter what. And then when it serves him the other way, he flip-flops and says the reverse. I think that's where I have a little bit more exception to it. I go, hey, man, like, if the situation was reversed, you would be saying all the right things to try and get your team in at only 6 games played. So I get it, and he's defending his guys as he absolutely should. I'll be honest, you know, like I think it's a big disadvantage. I don't think it's the advantage that everyone is saying that it, you know, or at least that he and some of the other talking heads out there are saying it is. You see a big difference in especially Alabama and Clemson this year, somewhere in that, you know, 4, 5, 6, 7 game range played, where at the beginning of the season, none of us were looking at Alabama's defense and saying, oh, they're hands down going to be the number 1 team when it comes down to it. I don't think anybody was saying that. Right. And all of a sudden they become the best defense in the SEC. They're shutting people out. They're keeping people under 20 points easy. Whereas at the beginning of the season, they're allowing 40-something. Right. And, you know, and just total shootout, outscoring people. I think Ohio State, without being able to go live on live against guys that are not on your team, that you don't see every day in practice, I think that's going to hurt them a little bit. And so I'll be interested to see how they come out and they respond. Now playing guys that are the same talent level, that are the same size and speed and agility and everything like that, you know, and really getting hit as opposed to, you know, yeah, Indiana's a good scrappy team, but they're just not as talented as Ohio State was. And so no matter how much of a puncher's chance they may have had, it's different when you're lining up across from an Alabama or a Clemson. And so it will be really, really interesting to see which Ohio State team comes out, especially after the first, you know, 2 series. Who are they going to be on January 1st? I don't know. I don't think anybody knows. That's the crazy thing about it, right?
Yeah. I think so for sure. I think for me, just as a fan, I think my bigger thing was, and just going off that, my bigger thing was with the Big Ten than with Ohio State. I feel like the Big Ten kind of flip-flopped a lot of what they were requiring. And as an outsider, it just kind of seemed like they were changing their rules to get Ohio State in. But I know Ohio State was just trying to play what was in front of them. So it's just a weird year. And so I'm glad we can play it. But I think that was the thing of just like the NCAA just didn't step in and say like, you need to play this many games. They left it open on purpose. And so it just kind of is what it is. But on the game, I think like Ohio State's one of the best 4 teams in the country. Like I think like if they got an opportunity, they absolutely deserve to be there from a talent standpoint. It was just a matter of like how many games. But I think the thing I'm most interested in is one, I want to see if Olave can come, the wide receiver from Ohio State can come and play. And if he does, like how well he plays. And then how does like the offensive line from Ohio State face up with a defensive line with Clemson? Like can Ohio State get a running game like with what Trey Sermon did and get them going? Because Fields has been struggling the past few weeks in the most recent couple games. So can they get the running game going? Like how well can Ohio State establish themselves in the game on both lines of scrimmage? So to any of y'all, like what does each team have to do really well, do you think, to win? Like, what is like a key thing that you're looking for? Like, if Ohio State does this well, they win, and vice versa. Will, you go first.
I'll go first as the unbiased third party in this. I think Ohio State's key is going to be the play of Fields. I know it's kind of obvious and taking the short way out, but it's the right answer. Like, how well does he play? The game is going to be won and lost for Ohio State, starting with the quarterback. I think for Clemson, it's actually going to be ETN. So ETN, I think he's actually had, not that saying he's had a down year in terms of like a normal human being, but for the expectations placed on him, he hasn't done as well as I think we all expect him to do. So I think that getting him involved in the run game, Trevor is going to be good. Those receivers are going to be huge threats. I think it's going to be if they can get ETN, turn him loose, control, keep Fields off the field, and control the clock that way. I think is their biggest key.
Yeah, that's right. Chad.
Yeah, I think Fields is a pretty key player. I would say, I do agree. I think ETN is your X factor, right? He's so good catching the ball out of the backfield. And so you've got to have somebody that can account for that. Ohio State's safety play has been underwhelming at best, we will say, this season. And so someone that can cover ETN out of that field, but also make a tackle when they need to and space on him is a big deal. On the flip side, I think, absolutely, Justin Fields is the key player for Ohio State. If you had to pick one guy defensively, I'd say it'd be Shaun Wade. He hasn't necessarily shined out on the outside as the way he did in the slot last year. And I think that's been a big disappointment to the Buckeyes as well. So I think, key for the Buckeyes is going to be win the line play. That Clemson defensive line is good, but they're very young, and they're going up against a veteran offensive line that will be the biggest one that they've seen all season. And so I think if OSU can get the run game going and limit big plays on the defensive side of the ball, I think they have a really good shot at winning. On the flip side, though, I think if Clemson can hit the big plays that Ohio State has allowed all season long to every team, including Rutgers, then they could walk away with this. There's I think that 6.5 to 7.5 point spread is super accurate. I have a tough time. Sometimes I think about it and I go, that feels high. And then sometimes I think about it and I go, that is not high enough. I don't know. It's going to be interesting. Obviously I want the Buckeyes to win. I'll be honest, I'm not feeling a whole lot of confidence in that. I'd pick Clemson to win by 7. And I think that line is pretty spot on. So I don't know.
Yeah, that's very fair. Hank, what do you think?
Yeah, a lot of this is just kind of echoing Will and Chad. I think I do have kind of more confidence that Clemson would win, even as a Buckeye fan. But I don't think that ETN worries me as much as like the deep balls do. If you look at kind of some of the like big games Ohio State's played in, if you look at like Penn State, which obviously now doesn't seem as big, but like Indiana, Northwestern, a lot of these teams, especially looking at like Indiana, Michael Penix Jr. was able to throw for close to 500 yards against this defense, and their leading rusher in that game had 10 yards for Indiana. And that's the case with a lot of these teams. They're passing for several hundred yards, and the leading rusher will have close to like 30 or 40 yards against them. And so the run game from Clemson, I don't think bothers me as much. The one thing in that I will say is Lawrence is a very underrated runner. And his legs were a lot of what burned Ohio State in their bowl game last year. And so I think containing Lawrence, keeping him in the pocket, and then I think the corners can do a good enough job. But like you said, Chad, I think it's up to the safeties to contain that deep ball, not allow anything over the top. And I think Ohio State's defense needs to I don't think they're going to contain Lawrence, but I think it's bending and not breaking that'll win them this game. I think if they can hold Clemson to field goals and not touchdowns, I think their offense has enough firepower to be able to keep up with Clemson's offense. And so I think it'll be just a matter of not just preventing touchdowns, which is obviously a lot easier said than done, but I think it lies on the defensive side for Ohio State. And then on the flip side, it's just if Clemson can get the deep ball going or kind of break off big plays, I think if ETN does happen to break off some big runs and open up the play action for them, they can put up a lot of points pretty quickly. And so I think they definitely have the advantage over Ohio State in this one, but I'm curious to see how Ohio State's secondary in particular plays.
Yeah, I think those are all very fair points. And I think it also really helps it's interesting because they just played each other last year. So they are different teams, but they both know what each other wants to do, which I think is very an interesting point of this.
Yeah. And even though they are different teams, like you said, Nick, they both play in a very similar way. The offense in particular, since Ohio State maybe not as reliant on the rush without J.K. Dobbins, but it's still the Fields versus Lawrence show. And those two players have not changed their style of play over the course of a year. And so I really think it's going to come down to those two again.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I mean, obviously Fields is a big player. I think honestly, we, as a Clemson fan, our offensive line is not as strong as it was last year. I think that they implemented on new players, but we're not getting as much of a push we have in years past when it comes to the run game. And also, I know for a huge factor, they've been trying to get ETN out of the backfield in the passing game, and so that's really helped his draft stock. But they use that kind of as a run as well. I'm most interested in, like, for Clemson's side, can we protect Lawrence well enough to give him time and give people space on the outside? And on defense, like, can Clemson get pressure on Fields and kind of bottle up the run game and make them a little more predictable? That's what I'm kind of looking for, because if you give Fields a chance to use his legs and get, like, you have these running backs get to the outside, I think it can make it really interesting, because I think the strength of the team is you have a couple corners on the outside and Skalski in the middle with the linebackers, but we haven't been as strong. And that's what Notre Dame did really well, is they ran off tackle and got passed into the second level. And if they can get the outside, then I think someone like Sermon can be dangerous. And another factor too is Nolan Turner is out for targeting, our starting safety for the first half. And so we'll have a younger guy in the backfield. So can Ohio State take advantage of trying to get some big plays early and try to make Clemson play catch up? I can. That's pretty much, y'all have already said most of what I was kind of thinking of, but those are the kind of things I'm looking for. Is can Ohio State get ahead, or are they trying to play catch up the whole time? I think if they're trying to play catch up, then I think the offenses can just trade punches. So who do y'all have officially as winning? This one's a little bit more straightforward than Alabama, Notre Dame.
Clemson.
Will, who do you have?
I have Clemson winning.
Everyone has Clemson. That's fair. I think 7 feels right, though. I think if a couple of things go Ohio State's way, they can definitely make it a game. So we're all saying Alabama, Clemson for a national championship.
No saucy picks here today.
No saucy picks here, but you never know. It's been a weird year, so a lot can happen.
I do have one thing.
Yeah.
All time Ohio State is 0-6 against the state of South Carolina Power 5 teams. Did you know that?
Yes.
They are 0-4 against Clemson and 0-2 against the Gamecocks.
Right.
2000-2001 Outback Bowl, baby. I was in 6th grade. It was awesome.
Hey, that got John Cooper fired, which I was totally fine with. and got
win-win.
Wrestle, which then brought us a national championship. So I'll take those two.
Win-win.
Win-win-win.
But yeah, going to Fields and Trevor, that makes me look forward to the Jets and Jags matchups in the next few years. This will be fun to watch.
Yeah, assuming it's going that way. As a fan, I would much rather Trevor go to Jacksonville. I don't trust the Jets. I just don't, and I'd rather him not be in New York.
As a fantasy football player with the potential first overall pick, I also like Trevor going to the Jags versus the Jets.
Yeah, Hank, we might have to do some talking off air if you're interested in trading some stuff.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, Hank is the number one pick, so or more than likely has a good shot at it. All right, guys. Well, let's see. Who do y'all have though? We can do this too. If it's Alabama Clemson, we can go quickly. Who would you have winning in that championship game?
Bama.
Chad too.
Yeah, definitely Bama.
Oh, definitely Bama. Will.
Sorry, I mean definitely.
There's one definitely.
It pains to say, but I think Clemson beats them.
Yeah, I'm going to go Clemson. I mean, I'm the homer, but I think we've got a really good shot. But Alabama is a very strong team, so it'd be very interesting to watch. But from outside perspective, I know that's not as exciting if you're tired of watching that matchup. But I'll be very glued to that game. So, well, gentlemen, thank you for joining me. This has been really fun. I'm glad we all got to do this during a busy holiday season. So, y'all, what I'm also going to do is I'm also going to put on the Backyard Catch Twitter page. We're going to have fan votes for these games. So be sure to follow Backyard Catch, just spells like as you think. And we'll put polls out there for this week, and we can vote who we think is going to win, who you have winning the game. So make sure to follow us there. We're on Instagram and Facebook as well. So remember to like and subscribe to the podcast and give us a review if you like. And stay tuned. We have some fun stuff coming in 2021. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks. We enjoyed it too.
Yeah.
Looking forward to the games.
Yeah. Here we go.
Thanks, Nick.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. All right, y'all. Thanks for listening. And for now, we are signing off.